let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We haven't
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say a
As the
developer-
Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is the Ask an OpenShift Expert live stream. We think it's been a while, it feels like, so we're getting back to pushing buttons and figuring out what we're supposed to do. So, Sully, man, it's good to see you. It's been a while again.
It has been it's been a long while. It's been like a month of Sundays since you and I were on here together.
Dude, I know.
Good to be back. Good to see you, my friend. Good to
Yeah,
see
you too, man. You too. So, I know you've been out saving the world. I've been out, basically, I'm the fat guy on the beach at this point. I was on PTO for pretty much all of July, and it was awesome to get away and take some time off and then try and swing back into it.
That sounds awful. That sounds so terrible.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I know. What was I thinking?
Yeah. well deserved. Well, very much earned, well deserved. I took 2 weeks off as well, the end of June, the end of July. So it was that's the most PTO I've taken, or in such a short window, in at least a decade.
Yeah.
Normally I'll take, a few days in the spring, I'll take a week in the summer, I'll take, time around the US holidays and stuff like that towards the end of the year. But taking 2 weeks in a 5-week span is I don't think it was even 5 weeks. I think it was 4 weeks. Like, that's just, it's something I've never done before. Literally, I don't think I've ever done that in my entire professional career, 20 something years.
It's almost hard to. I don't think people. I know that there's people that understand. Like, if you're somebody that's constantly like just grinding all the time, like, you definitely understand this. But like, a lot of people don't understand. Like, taking 2 weeks off, it is so much work to come back. Like, because you've now got to catch up with everything. You've got to reply to emails. You've got to get yourself back in like work mode, and it's a ton of effort just to get back in the swing of things.
Yeah. Well, and it's deceptive. Like, I come back after a week and I'm like, oh, look, I've got 40 emails. Well, no, those are 40 email threads. And that's just in my inbox after all of the filtering and everything else. And so 3/4 of those are legitimate things that I need to go through and look at. And somebody asked me, one of the folks on my team is like, oh, we've got access to, Gemini and all the LLMs. Like, why don't you have it do a summary? Because I don't, like, the summaries always missed important details.
Yeah.
And so it's helpful for me to, like, I have a meeting coming up and I don't remember what we've talked about or what led to that meeting. So let me ask, the LLM to dig through my inbox and find the history on this so I can remember what it was about. Or, here's this 30 message long chain that I haven't looked at in 2 weeks, remind me what we talked about previously in this chain, type of thing. But like, completely new threads, and on new topics, and coming back after that, like, I can't use the LLMs for that type of stuff. It doesn't help. Yeah.
I'm fortunate, like, where my communication pool these days is super small. So back when I was in consulting and stuff like that, I was in the same boat but that was back in my day before we had LLMs. It was always difficult to come back, because now you've got to catch up to these meetings, or you've got to resync with your calendar, and then just kind of get back in the groove, and then find the motivation to come back when you've been. But hopefully you stayed away from your laptop like I did. Like, I actually didn't even log into mine. I took it with me and I didn't even charge it. I was like, I don't even know if it's going to turn on. Like, this is pretty awesome.
That's how you know it's a good PTO, when you have to, like, struggle to remember your password.
It was good, man. It really was. Like, it was like, I went up to Scotland, and then we went back to the US for a little bit, and yeah, it was good to get just completely disconnected. So
yeah. So I'm a manager, right? And like, I always keep an eye on, like, my team, the people who are on my team. They are VIP in Slack. Their messages always come through. And then my boss, right? And so this last PTO, we were in Maine. We went to Acadia National Park, which is beautiful, by the way. It was great. We had a blast. So my team, they're all awesome, and so they're like, we're not going to contact you unless something is literally on fire, type of thing. And my manager, my boss, is the same way. So, but I was like, oh, I'll join the company meeting, right? The company meeting was that week. No, I was in Acadia. There's just very little cell service. So I had, as I was hiking, going up, I don't remember what day it was, either Cadillac Mountain or Sergeant Mountain or one of those, I had 0 cell service. Because it was like, oh, I can hike and listen to a thing while I'm trying not to die. No, it didn't happen.
Turn your camera on. You're like,
yeah. Well, so my wife is far more adventurous than I am, right? And so we get there and she's like, oh, I really want to hike Beehive. I'm like, all right, I did a little bit of research and it's like, yeah, you're climbing up, this mountain and it's only like 800 feet tall. I'm like, okay, I'm a middle-aged fat guy, like I can probably survive 800 feet.
I'll win this.
So Beehive, if you aren't familiar with it, is like you start up the trail, you start at sea level, you go up the trail, and it's like an old creek bed. It's a bunch of boulders and stuff like that. So immediately you're basically bouldering on the first couple hundred feet. And then you get to the base and there's a split where you go up the side of the mountain or you go around and come up. My wife's like, oh, we're going this way. It's like literally rock climbing. Like there are metal stairs, like metal things that are embedded in the rock that you're like scaling the front of this thing. Now I'm not afraid of heights, right? I'm afraid of falling, but I'm not afraid of heights.
Yeah.
So it was one of those like I would just had this paranoia of like, oh, I'm gonna hit like a patch of loose dirt or a patch of rocks or somebody up above because it was pretty crowded is gonna drop a water bottle or something like that. And so I was a little uncomfortable with that, and I've been giving my wife a hard time of like trying to kill me, type of thing. But it actually was really good. We had a blast. It really enjoyed every aspect of it. So
yeah, that's awesome, dude. You guys should go out to Zion National Park out in it's in Utah. If you haven't been there yet, it was incredible. So we did a similar hike out there. It's Angels Land, I think it's called Angels Landing or something like that. But you walk across this rickety bridge, and it's one of those moments. It's a pucker hike. Like you go up, it's difficult, and then you go across the thing, and you're like I'm not scared of heights either, but I am scared of dying. And I'm like, I was definitely uncomfortable, but it was a great hike. Zion Park National Park is incredible.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it. So we're the next one that's on my list that I really want to go to is Glacier. So we'll figure out how to get there.
Ooh, yeah, that's gonna be awesome.
Yep. So I know it's mid-August. It's been the better part of 2 months now since 422 shipped, but today we're finally doing the OpenShift 422 what's new, for the focus set of things, right, from you and I on this one.
Yeah, it's so I was gonna try and do this before, but then I think we had a couple weeks in a row where we had somebody scheduled, and then you were out and then I was out, so we just kind of kept pushing it. So I figured, like we were kind of talking beforehand, we'll go over some of the things, and really we'll just try and set up another episode where we can deep dive into some of these things if people are interested in it. But there's actually a lot of cool stuff that's going on in this release that, like, I looked at the initial, like, hey, here's the hotness out of this release, and then dove into the actual what's new, and hopefully we picked out some things that are interesting to people, and hopefully you get something out of it. And if you have any questions, like always, feel free to email us. Obviously, I'm Jonny at Red Hat, and Sully is Sully at redhat.com. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you guys have. If you see something going on, if you have certification questions, job questions, whatever, just feel free to hit us up. If we don't know the answer, we do have the benefit of having the bat phone back into the rest of Red Hat, so we can actually ask questions and hopefully get the answers that you're looking for. So.
Yeah, and our Hope 9, I see your comment there. It reminded me that I still have an open email somewhere to you because you requested. Oh yes, here. As I look at it, I have the email literally up on my screen with a draft response. I just haven't attached the document that you asked for to it. So my apologies. I clearly completely spaced on that one. I'll send it to you after our stream ends today.
All right, awesome. So August 26th, just to go over the schedule really quick. Oh, for sure, on the 26th, we have Christian Hernandez from Isovalent, also of Red Hat, formerly of Red Hat. He's going to come on the stream, and he's going to talk about some of the latest and greatest things that are coming on, that are coming out with Isovalent that they're doing on their GitOps side. And if I that did this the last time too. But anyways, he's going to come on, and yeah, that should be a pretty good episode. I'm trying to remember the other guy that works there. The name is just completely eluding me. Like, he was on the stream not that long ago, and it's just, anyways, it'll come to me when I don't need it. But yeah, so that's on the 26th. We're working with another group inside of Red Hat. There was an incident with OpenAI and Hugging Face over the weekend. And so we're going to try and get Sean and some of the guys from the security side to come on and talk about it. So that way people that know what they're talking about can kind of come on and talk about the implications of what happened, and hopefully give you some ideas of how you can protect yourself if something like this happens. It was something with OpenAI and the Hugging Face repository. I don't know. I can't remember all the details. So just know there was a thing.
The short version, and thank you for the reminder, or Hope 9, it was Dean Lewis.
Yes, Dean, every single time.
Yeah, the short version of the Hugging Face thing was that OpenAI's agents went rogue and basically collaborated with each other, expanded their scope, and then performed an attack against the Hugging Face infrastructure, all on their own. So anyways, the internal chatter around it is super interesting, because of course, like most organizations, I suspect these days, we have varying amounts of agents that are running in all kinds of different ways, whether it's I'll say autonomous agents that are doing things on behalf of users, or just individuals that are prompt sitting, right, and going through and approving and or chatting with it as we go through. So and of course, there's things like Lightwell that are coming to fruition, where Lightwell relies on a lot of coding agents in order to do what it does. So I'm curious to hear like what folks are hearing, what folks are seeing. Like I'm curious to hear from our own security folks about what that means and what that looks like, and like how do we implement these things safely? How do we take advantage of all of these things? Sandboxing is a huge thing. There's the infamous, in the early days of OpenClaw, there was a lot of incidents where people would have their OpenClaw agent running and it would just go off and start doing things they didn't want it to, right? Sending emails and stuff like that. And it's funny because one of the things I'm going to bring up with 422 is the MCP server, right? And so MCP server is in tech preview. I think it has been since 421 actually, but I just started using it. And you do legitimately have to be careful. Like it wants to solve the problem, and it will sometimes do things that you don't want it to do. And so I have started, like, I've been in the habit of like don't give it blanket permissions, because like Claude codes, when I run it in a terminal, say like, oh, is it okay for me to run this command? Maybe it's an OC command or something like that. And if you just do the blanket, yes, and don't ask me again, for this session type of thing, you can get yourself in trouble real quick.
-Y, baby.
Yeah. So yeah, it's it's a brave new world, right? I'm interested to see, and I think I've said this before here on the live stream. I've certainly said it to other people inside of Red Hat, and even at Summit, as far back as Summit, we were talking about it, of tools like MCP and the LLMs, and even LLMs using OC CLI. They radically change the way I think that we tend to interact with the clusters. It certainly has for me. I'm able to do things far faster and with far less effort against my clusters than I ever have before, and it's good and bad, right? Is Hermes somewhat compatible with OpenShift? Will there be an enterprise open source solution like Hermes and OpenClaw? So yes, so Hermes agent you can deploy as a container into OpenShift. It'll work inside of there just as you would expect. I actually have in one of my clusters, I have a virtual machine in OpenShift virtualization that's running Hermes agent, because I wanted to give it enough permission on that virtual machine to be able to do things in the file system and stuff like that, because I'm doing some testing and things in that experience. But you can set it up and deploy it as a container-based agent. So as far as an enterprise open source solution for Hermes, I think that NemoClaw is sort of trying to be that. I don't know enough about the industry, and this is where I'd have to rely on some of our peers in like the AIBU But like my unprofessional and unrefined perspective is I think NVIDIA wants NemoClaw to be like that because it wraps OpenClaw with a bunch of security things, and then you can further wrap that around, within OpenShift around at least the platform level, allowing it to or not to do certain things. At the end of the day, you're still going to be beholden to, like, if you give it credentials to something that have more permissions than than it should have, like that's clearly an issue. There's inside of Red Hat, we have a thing where you can configure your Claude code or whatever thing you're using on your desktop with the GWS CLI. And so GWS, the Google Workspace CLI, like, you can give it permissions to send emails on your behalf. I find that terrifying. I don't want it to send emails, and in my personal opinion, telling it not to send emails is not good enough, because sometimes it'll still dream up harebrained things and rationalize to itself why it's okay to send an email in this instance, even though I was explicitly in all caps multiple times told never to send emails. So actively denying it those permissions through the API keys or whatever you happen to give it, service accounts, etc., I think is by far the best and safest way to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and like we saw a little bit of that too. Like we had Natalie come on, and he was showing how like using basically guardrails within pipelines and stuff like that, and within the their model, to where it helps prevent doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's basically kind of lock the AI into, hey, just go find out what the problem is and report it back, and don't actually, here's your bubble. And because you don't want to essentially give it like too many permissions to where it can just go out and do its thing.
Yeah,
which is not always good.
Yeah, and I think that's like the MCP server is an interesting one in that regard, because the MCP server, you can deploy it with a service account, so it only has whatever permissions you give to the service account, and that includes view only. And you can ask the LLM that's interacting with it, like, hey, tell me the commands to run, but you don't actually let it do it. That being said, like, I'm on a Mac, right? And so if I have one terminal window open and I do an OC login and I log into my cluster, and then I have another terminal window open and I open my Claude code and I say, hey, can you see the OC, can you connect to the MCP server for my cluster? And it says yes. You're going through and doing it. On more than one occasion, I've had it where it's like, oh, I couldn't do this through the MCP server, but OC was able to connect to the cluster, so I did this. It's like, no, like, so again, those times where I've found I have to be careful and have to be cognizant of what it's doing, and again, I staunchly refuse to give it blanket permissions without me reviewing things. It slows things down, but on the other hand, I just my clusters have nothing actually meaningful in them, other than my own emotional attachment to whatever I've got going on. So doing it on a production cluster that's actually doing revenue generating activities for the business is still a little outside of my comfort level. Yeah,
no, for sure. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times that I use the tools. I use Cursor all the time, and I think like a lot of what I end up doing is I spend a lot of time just reviewing and going back through the code, and like, is this thing putting a bunch of just garbage comments in here? Like, is it doing what I'm expecting it to? I do try and test everything. So I feel like I do spend a lot of time like nursing it and babysitting it and making sure it's doing what I'm expecting, versus just like, all right, well, see you later. It worked.
Yeah.
So.
It's I've never, well, I say never. I haven't been a developer in 20 years, and even then I wasn't really a developer. So it's interesting to me because I have a very different approach of like vibe coding things, of like I don't necessarily care about the details so much as I care about the results.
Yeah.
And then what I do find is, and like I can read most code languages and stuff like that. Like when I go in and look at it, it's one of those of, it's good enough for me for my test use cases and stuff like that, but I can recognize that my vibe coding through prompts and not actually going in and like using Cursor and highlighting the code sections and telling it to refine this or add this capability here and stuff like that. Like clearly Andrew is not a software engineer, and I would not trust myself with production things. But anyways. So in historical fashion, whenever we do these what's new in an OpenShift version streams, Jonny and I kind of cherry pick things that we think are interesting or cool or otherwise fun to talk about, and sometimes show when we have the opportunity. So that's kind of what we wanted to do here. If you have any questions, like if you watch the What's New stream from the product management team, wow, why could I not come up with the PMs? Anyways, if you watch the What's New in 422 live stream, probably 6 weeks ago, maybe 8 weeks ago now, if you have questions about things, if there's something you're curious about, please ask us. We're happy to go into as much detail as we know, and otherwise, search on the back end and see what information we can find while we're here on the stream and share it with you. Otherwise, we've got a pretty long list of things that we'll probably make it through about 30% of as we go through and talk about various things and why we think they're important or meaningful. But yeah, don't hesitate to ask questions, to reach out to us, to chat and let us know what's interesting to you or anything like that. Jonny, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll start it off.
You were in this document before I was, so you have a lot more things at the beginning than I do. So
yeah, so one of the first things that I wanted to show is sorry, I got to get back. I'm out of sync. I gotta find my rhythm again. Just looking through the What's New presentation, and I've uploaded it to Speaker Deck. I'm actually going through. I'll share the link hopefully before we're done. If not, I'll actually put it in the show notes when this is all said and done with.
So, as an aside, we're supposed to not supposed to be using Speaker Deck anymore. So I do have a solution for that we finally figured out. So if you go to the What's Next and What's New landing page, right now it doesn't have links to any of the presentations. They're technically still in Speaker Deck. But anyways, the upcoming solution is we'll drop them into a KCS and then we'll link them from there. Because for reasons that I'm not going to belabor, we don't have an effective way of publishing content like that through the redhat.com portal.
Yeah. Okay.
we got a question here from. So is OpenShift meant to connect with a supervisor with direct access to GPU infrastructure to provide to internal pods? I'm not sure what you mean by that. So you don't need, unless you're doing inferencing or graphics acceleration, right, running a VDI infrastructure or something like that, unless your workload needs a GPU, OpenShift itself doesn't. So you can do that, however. So for example, if I'm deploying an inferencing workload into OpenShift, I can have that be on bare metal where it has access to those resources using something like DRA or other, the traditional way that we pass GPU resources. That includes both vGPU and GPU pass-through, for example, both with pods as well as with virtual machines. Or if OpenShift is running in a virtual machine, then it can access those GPU resources as well. But you don't need it unless your workload needs it.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so going through the What's New, What's Next, or What's New in 422 slide deck, I saw that one of the featured RFEs that they had published was the use of Carpenter, and I feel like I've heard of Carpenter before, but I've never really looked into it. And it's basically just like a super scheduler, right? Like it does just in time scheduling, and it's basically resource management and stuff like that. So I just thought that it was pretty cool that they used it, and that it's actually part of ROSA. Another thing that they've done is they've exposed some of the metrics for the Hypershift, the ROSA Hypershift bit of this. So if you're interested in looking up what Carpenter can do, here is the link.
Yeah, Carpenter is actually even more cool than that, because Carpenter will dynamically choose and add nodes to the cluster, basically provision infrastructure off of AWS based off of the workload.
Yeah, that is so awesome.
Yeah, so it's a really cool tool, especially if you're trying to optimize costs and do dynamic scaling with your cluster. So adding and removing nodes on demand, stuff like that. Carpenter's a really cool thing to have inside of there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I just, like I said, I'd heard of it and I've just never dug into it. It feels like I need to just spin up a cluster and just kind of kick the tires with it a little bit. It seems really cool. But yeah, because just on the surface, like I've never really dug into it, so I've never installed it. I don't know what the user experience is like with it or anything like that. But I when I was looking at the features, I was like, oh man, I've definitely, this seems pretty cool. But yeah, so I shared the link. So if you're interested in taking a look for yourself, go ahead. Another thing that is, it's more of an announcement than anything, is that with this release of 422, and if you're a console plugin developer, or if you do any work with console plugins, they've some of the changes that they push out are breaking changes. So if you look at this link that I'm sharing, it basically goes through and it tells you what you need to upgrade to, so that way your pattern fly, if you're doing development on your plugin, it'll work when you go to 422 and later versions. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I don't know if you also have it in here. I have this one as one of the ones that I called out as well. In the day and age of vibe coding, right? I have several background tasks or tasks that on my backlog rather, for creating sample or example dynamic plugins for various features and capabilities that I care about that just haven't made it into the main OpenShift side of things. So this is one that I was all of a sudden like, oh wait, I do need to care about this, because now it's relevant and it changes the things that I'm trying to do. Whereas before I never would have done that. But yeah. I'm interested in a few different things. Like I have a very specific vision of how I want to be able to visualize OpenShift node networking configuration. And so it's one of those, like, having worked with engineering, and like we provide a ton of feedback into them, and engineering, they have to be careful isn't the right word. They have to be deliberate in how they do things, because there's backports, there's testing. It has to work with all of the different versions. It has to be supportable and supported and all this other stuff. So it's understandable that it takes them a lot more time and effort in order to implement things. Whereas me, I can just YOLO a vibe coded thing out there and get a good visualization of what it looks like. And so long as it works in my cluster, I don't have to worry about it, right? Nobody's going to pick up the phone and call me except me. So there's a lot of stuff that I really want to test out and try out, as we see, as I get more comfortable and familiar, and just learning myself how to use the coding agents. Yeah.
No, and even within our team, like we've started to develop a UI around the pattern kind of CRD, and yeah, same thing. Just it's kind of nice to be able to just spin something up, throw it in the cluster. Like, oh, this looks great. This looks like total garbage. Maybe we shouldn't do this. Like it's pretty nice. But yeah, so that table, it just kind of shows you like, hey, here's a version that in previous versions it basically breaks in 422, and then they show you what to update to. So just keep an eye on that, and then hopefully everything goes smoothly. One of the other things that I saw that was pretty cool is this OCI stuff with Helm, and I'm going to share my screen really quick. And I've got like 8 billion tabs open, so this is going to be amazing trying to find it.
You and me both.
Yeah. So and this is just a normal 4.22 cluster, nothing crazy. But if I go over to ecosystem and then I go to Helm, and actually what I'm going to do is, let's see. I am gonna.
You might need to make your screen a little bigger.
Oh, yep, no worries. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So the thing that was implemented this release is you can actually deploy a Helm chart based off of its OCI address. So if you do anything with Helm and you push your images into Quay key, whatever you call it, but you have like an OCI compliant image. Before you couldn't map to it or install it from that OCI link. So now you can. So if you just do something like OCI : and then in this case, it's going to be, and I'll call it cluster group. What it does is it enables this this Helm chart on this cluster. So if I were to install this, it would actually install this Helm chart. So this, if you're not familiar with validated patterns, this is our core Helm chart. So this cluster group chart actually deploys all of the other bits of the pattern. So this is actually like a very significant piece of ours. But it's just kind of cool because it exposes all of the variables that are within this Helm chart that you can turn on, and like things that you can override. You can actually, if you're using the pattern framework, we actually go and scrape the cluster for all this information, so you wouldn't have to put this in. But just to give you an example of like, hey, look, I've got this chart. It's not in it's actually in a chart repository, but it's also in a Quay registry as an OCI artifact. And so now I can just map directly to that OCI artifact instead of having to, map to a new repository if I didn't want to do that. Additionally, under Helm, if I go into repositories and I wanted to add a new one, I just did the exact same thing. So like, just ignore that thing. I can add a repository. I can actually add a namespace, and this has been around for a long time, but just validated patterns, and then VP, not CP, VP, because I can't type.
You got a typo in your name if you're actually going to create it, by the way.
You know what's funny? I did this earlier too. I was sharing a link with somebody and I typed it out. This is why I shouldn't type in text or type and talk.
Listen, anybody who's watched the stream before knows that my fingers in my mouth have to be saying and typing the same thing, or it just doesn't work.
Yes. All right, so I've created this repository. Now the cool thing is if I go over here to my software catalog, I should now, oh my God. Now I can find my Helm chart again just by enabling that repository. So it goes out and it does it scrapes the chart repository for all the Helm charts that you have out there. And then again on the OCI bit, which is the newest feature, if you have your image out in a Quay registry or Artifactory or something like that, whatever OCI compliant registry you have your Helm chart in, you can actually map directly to that and install it directly in your cluster. I thought that was kind of nice. I use Helm all the time, so it's kind of cool to see that. Let's see, and then stop sharing. And then one of the other things that I thought was pretty neat is if you're a HyperShift user, you can now use spot instances for the HyperShift for your node pool. So I'm going to share the RFE. So yeah, you should be able to see at least the public knowledge on that. But yeah, if before your images that you could use, I'm trying to remember the exact verbiage in the CLI, but the images that you could use were or machine types rather that you could use were the standard, general purpose. You could use like M6s, M5s, whatever, and then a few other ones. But now you can actually map down to these spot instances, which will help you save some money in the long run. Hopefully, that way you're not running full scale crazy stuff.
Yeah. So you said HyperShift, which is the project behind hosted control planes. So does that mean that this is supported? You can use spot instances with Rosa?
I don't know if you can use it for Rosa. It is supported though. So it's one of the key RFPs that got implemented.
Interesting. RHOPE 9, so new multi-OS stream. Since the new multi-OS stream, how long will nodes support RHEL 9? So my understanding is that today with OpenShift 4.22, RHEL 9 continues to be the supported, or RCOS 9 continues to be the supported stream. RHEL 10 is tech preview. In the future, we will add or jointly support RHEL 9 and RHEL 10 nodes. And at some point in the future, we would then drop support for RHEL 9 nodes. So on the back end, right, RCOS 9, which is based on RHEL 9. So on the back end, Red Hat juggles all of those things around. So the engineering team for RCOS aligns with whatever the RHEL, long-term support releases are and all that type of stuff. One of the things I called out with RCOS 10 being in tech preview is RHEL 10, RCOS 10 moves to the x86 v3 instruction set on the hardware. So probably not a big deal for most data center deployments. I think Intel added support for v3 in like their 2013 generation of CPUs, and AMD was a couple of years later. I want to say like 2015. But if you're running like super old hardware somewhere, if you're standing up right in 2026 when hardware is expensive and difficult to find, maybe you're holding on to things longer than we would before. Just check before you move to, or if you want to use RCOS 10 inside of there. The other one is with edge devices. So in my cursory amount of research, like the Intel Atom line of things, so think like edge devices and all other small deployments may or may not support those. So just be careful. Also home labs, right? If anybody has a home lab and they're deploying OpenShift or even RHEL 10 inside of there, just be aware of what may or may not work with that. I think RHEL 10, you can have it move back to the V2 instruction set. You can force it, but yeah, for some period of time, we will support both RHEL 9, or excuse me, RCOS 9 and RCOS 10. I keep saying RHEL because it's RHEL, but it's not RHEL.
Yeah.
And note that 4.18 was the last version that supported RHEL nodes at all. 4.19 and later, it is RCOS only.
Yeah, I was just trying to find I was trying to see if I could find anything on the ROSA thing. I think if I'm reading this correctly, it's for self-managed AWS. So if you were using self-managed AWS, you can use spot instances. It looks like it should be. It's a work in progress. It's been approved and stuff like that for the ROSA HyperShift. So, and I'm terrible about cool name versus product name about hosted control plane at HyperShift. I'm set in my ways.
So it's funny. I've been doing a number of hosted control planes presentations lately, and like we did one on the Power 90, which is one of our internal enablement things, and it's like I was covering different not architectures but deployment scenarios with hosted control planes, and like the naming nomenclature is so hard because like hosted control planes is the feature, but it's also how we describe the clusters that are being deployed. They're a hosted control plane cluster, but the cluster that's hosting the control plane, sometimes called the hosting cluster, can be different than the cluster that's hosting the node pools. And so you have different node, and then it's like, okay, so the HCP hosting, the HCP control plane hosting cluster can be different than the HCP node pool hosting cluster. And it's like, oh God, like what? How is this, like, why is this so hard? And
yeah,
because you can have with hosted control planes, I can have one cluster where I have all the things deployed, and I instantiate my hosted cluster object, and then I have it instantiate the control plane in a different cluster, which then attaches node pools and deploys resources into yet another third or even 3+, a third or other clusters, because I can have those node pools come from different places. And then it gets even weirder because I can have a bare metal hosted control plane cluster. So I have a cluster that's hosting the control plane for a bare metal cluster that then deploys node pools for another hosted control plane cluster using OpenShift virtualization, and that control plane can be hosted in either cluster. Yeah, and it gets weird.
Hell yeah, that's real Inception right there.
Yeah. So I love me some hosted control planes. Like there's a lot of really cool things that you can do there, but yeah, it is like trying to describe it is just hard.
Yeah.
And I haven't figured it out because when we talk to folks, I'm an OpenShift virtualization person at the core, right? So like we talk to people and they're like, oh, I want to move my virtual OpenShift clusters into OpenShift virtualization. How should I do that? And it's like, well, hosted control planes has a lot of advantages. And then they're like, great, tell me about it. And then it's like, okay, now we're going to spend the next hour like just explaining the basics. And of course, like if you're new to OpenShift and OpenShift virtualization and you're already looking at this like, seemingly overwhelming tidal wave of information you got to learn, having like this now like baseline set of very confusing knowledge that you have to start with, like I get why people struggle with that, and like it feels scary. Like, it is scary. Like so, I don't know how to fix that yet. But I'm going to keep throwing. I've used the analogy. This will be the third time this week of throwing noodles at the wall to see which ones stick.
Yes.
We'll get there.
Yes. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. So I hope that answered your question. I realize in a very roundabout, rambling way. So for a period of time, both will be supported, and then eventually it'll move to where RHEL 10 is only RHEL 10 nodes are supported. RCOS 10. I'll eventually get there. But all of that will align with our support things. So if we have, if let's say that 422 is it's not, but I'm going to say hypothetically, let's say that 422 is the last one to support RCOS 9 nodes. 422 is a long-term support release, so it'll be supported for like 4 years or whatever the current setup is, and that includes the underlying rail.
Yeah. Yeah. So just real quick, the last one. Oh, there's actually 3 more. There's a few more. There's there's a lot. This is actually a cool release. I'll be honest. Like there's a lot on it that I was like, oh man, this is actually pretty dope. One of them is like, if you've ever seen or if you've ever heard me talking about Quay and like the stuff that, you know, if you're trying to automate Quay or anything like that, it used to be really painful because if you had to do like any type of token generation or anything like that, you actually had to write a script or there was just magic that you had to write. It wasn't very GitOpsy. And one of the things that they did in this release, and this is something that I feel like we should use another stream for, is now there's a built-in GitOps approach to token management, right? So if you need to generate like an OAuth token for access to a repository or whatever, like now there's a GitOps way of doing it, which I think is, especially me selfishly, I think that this is awesome because that was my big gripe about Quay in the beginning. Is just it's very hard to manage and get set up. But now that it feels like, okay, now we're thinking about automation, we're kind of like thinking of GitOps as part of like the baked-in deployment method and stuff like that. So I think that that's really awesome. They also have cert manager integration, which is going to eliminate some of the expired certificate problems that you have. So this is another stream topic, I think, where we can show hopefully like a certificate expiring and then you're rolling out a new one and then the pod's getting going through like a rolling update and stuff. And then they've done some stuff with the next gen mirror registry, which is supposed to help with resource consumption. That again, something that we'll have to look at and kind of see and do hopefully a side-by-side comparison. But I just saw that those features were as part of this new release. So I'm like, all right, it's definitely, there's a lot there. There's something, probably a stream or two that we could spend digging into all this stuff. And then real quick before I turn this over to you, and I'm hyper. I'm getting all amped up here. I haven't talked to you in a long time. I'm getting excited. So let me try and chill out here. But no, just there's some stuff with OC Mirror v2 that they've added, and hopefully, can you see that, or do I need to make it a little bit bigger?
That's good.
All right, cool. So with OC Mirror v2, you can actually do operators. Actually, let's do this. You can list the releases. So say if you don't know what all the releases are on your system, you can actually have OC Mirror dump out a list of releases, and then within those releases, you can actually look at the available channels that are there. So this helps you just kind of like narrow down and really scope out exactly what you're trying to mirror into your cluster. And of course, because I did this live, it's going to take its sweet time.
See, I haven't seen any of this yet. I've been harping on the team of folks, not for OC Mirror, but for the installer experience as a whole. Of like, hey,
yeah,
like we really need to make this process a lot more user friendly. Of like, as a user, I don't want to have to go in and like. The process used to be like, if I need to create a custom operator catalog, like I have to go and launch this container and then use gRPC to query it for the list of packages. Like, how are we this user hostile in 2026?
Yeah, exactly. I like when I saw this on the release, I was like, this is awesome. And then I just ran it just to see what it would look like. And it's awesome. You can see you get all the releases. And then within that channel, right? So or within the release, you can say, list all the channels for me. And now you can see all the actual channels that are out there it should just be for 422, but it's just throwing the whole world out there. And then if you wanted to see the list of operators that were in a specific channel, I can't hit Control K or Control W because it'll close my window. So I have to be careful. And hopefully I didn't fat finger. Dang it, I did. All right, so list operators, catalog register.
Tag and digest. You probably need either the SHA or a particular.
Oh, you know what?
Tag.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so yeah, so here you would run OC Mirror, and this is just the 422 version. So if you go to mirror.openshift.com/pub and then you browse down, you can actually get this directly. You just throw the --v2 and then you list the operators. You tell it which catalog you want to use, and then it will dump out a list of all of the operators that are within that catalog. So say if you had, the Red Hat operators, you had certified operators, community operators, you could actually dump out this entire list. So it makes it really nice. So if, say you wanted to install the storage-based remediation operator, it gives you the name of the operator itself and then the channel that you would use to pull. So when you're configuring your image set config, now you've got all this information right here. It's actual parsable information that you could maybe dump out the YQ, or you could at least script it out and automate your image set config, which I think, to your point, Andrew, it's about that user experience. I think they're on the right track now with this. This is really nice.
Yeah, one of the things I'm hoping to add is like, OpenShift has no, there's nothing in OpenShift that prevents you from deploying, oh, my subscription is OKE. So there's nothing that prevents you from deploying an OCP operator inside of the cluster. So one of the ways that I know a lot of folks solve that is by having a limited operator catalog.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, Jonny, who is, just an app team person, right? He doesn't want to have to know or care about, anything with OpenShift licensing. He looks in his cluster and sees these list of operators available. And I, as the OpenShift super admin, have limited his operators just to the OKE set. So today, again, that's one of those things that's a little bit challenging because you have to have a cluster that's up and running and then query for the list of operators from a catalog, the Red Hat catalog, and then within the metadata there, it has which subscription or editions the operator is allowed with, supported for.
Yeah.
And so like you can look for, give me all of the operators that are OKE, give me all of the operators that are OCP, and it'll spit out that list and then take those and just mirror them over. But we already know that data. Like, why can't I just make that a checkbox, right?
Yeah.
Or in this case, maybe a CLI option of, OKE only or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. They're on the right track though. Like I'd say
100%. What you just showed is like 1,000% improvement over what it used to be. Like I cannot now I'm excited about it. Like who would have thought I'd be excited about mirroring something?
Yeah, dude. And I've just recently used the V2 OC Mirror again. And I mean, it's just the consistency. You know what I mean? I feel like that's probably the best part of it is like, it's not like before where maybe, I don't know, something would go wrong in the middle and then you'd have to go back and, it's the consistency of each of the pools has been very nice. And even if I blow away the cache and do it again, it's been it's Chick-fil-A, man. It's the same every time. It's really nice.
Like how you call out Chick-fil-A there, not any of the others. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Chick-fil-A. I miss me some Chick-fil-A. I'm trying to think. Yeah, so the last one really is more, there's a tech preview feature and it's for external secrets. It's the external secrets management console. And at its core, it's a plugin for external secrets operator. And so what it does is it just shows you, hey, here's all the secrets that you have, all the secret resources that the ESO is managing within your cluster. And again, it's tech preview, so it's not quite fully functional, but I think once it actually goes GA, it's going to be a nice thing to have because then you can go in. I couldn't tell if you were able to create any secrets or anything like that, or if it's just a view. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, just that was one of the core things that I saw that was like, all right, this is kind of neat. That's someone that uses ESO pretty much daily.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't looked at it. I saw it mentioned, and I thought that was. It's interesting, right? As we're evolving, and I feel like it's taken forever to add external secrets, and the external secrets operator to get all of that into the product. But I get why it's so hard, because we want to be safe. We want to have attestation and all of those things associated with it, and that takes time. So I don't know. I'm happy to see all that come about.
Yeah. And I just checked it. It's just view only, so it'll just show you the secrets that are in your cluster.
I don't know. I got a bunch of stuff too. Well, I'm gonna have to be careful on time. So Probably the first one I want to talk about is we've been flirting around the topic and talking about it in various ways already, and that is Lightspeed and just integrating with LLMs and all the other stuff. Come on, buddy. There we go. So this is my 422 cluster. You can see I'm on 422 too, and we have Lightspeed installed in here. And so this Lightspeed instance is using Gemini Flash 3.6, I think, inside of here. So the interesting thing about how Lightspeed works, so if I come in here to workloads, pods, and I want Lightspeed. So if you look inside of here, with Lightspeed 1.1, they added a bunch of things, and probably the biggest one that you look at, so one, there's this Postgres server, there's an MCP server, and then there's OKP, which is the offline knowledge portal. So effectively what happens when I ask Lightspeed things, it's now able to interact with the cluster via the read-only MCP instance that it has local inside of its namespace, as well as it uses the OKP, the offline knowledge portal, to query the documentation directly from inside of there. And then this Postgres server is actually used, there's a quadrant, I think. I don't know if it's quadrant. There's some kind of vector memory database that's inside of there that has some additional information inside of there. Anyways, Lightspeed has actually gotten really, really interesting and really cool in my opinion. So for example, so I can say, what is the health of my cluster? Right, and what should happen here, you see it's popping up these little chips or whatever it calls them in the UI. One thing I dislike about this is how much screen space just it doing its thing takes up. So I'm gonna expand this and hopefully it doesn't become unreadable. But what's the health of my cluster, right? It queried for a bunch of data, and I can look at this and tell, you know, here's the MCP query that it did and what the response was and all that. And it tells me about everything that's inside of here, right? And I can ask for more details. So what VMs are running? Are they healthy? And same thing, it's going to use, you know, resource list, right? It's using the MCP server and it's querying, and it's going to return back a list of the things that are inside of here. So I don't know, I was super impressed by this. In my opinion, it's gotten significantly better and more useful for troubleshooting and otherwise figuring out what's going on inside of the cluster. I was troubleshooting a thing earlier, and so in one of my namespaces, I've got I've got a build, right? So I've been working on this sizing tool thing, and I wanted to have it trigger a build based off of a git commit. And so, the Gitty service that's running, or deployment that's running inside of here, it's running inside of the cluster. But I'm using a self-signed certificate. So of course it barfed at that. And the suggestion that Lightspeed had was like, oh, we'll just switch it, since it's deployed internally, switch it to use the internal service name, and then it'll have the CA already added into the environment, so you won't have to worry about it. Like, oh, that's brilliant. Okay. So it's been, I don't know, it's been super helpful. The other side of that, of course, is you can do the same thing with your CLI. So here.
So
go ahead.
How is it when you add another, like another layered operator on there? So like say if you put service mesh, does it automatically, does it have like skills that it gets injected or anything like that? Or does it just have like a knowledge base that it's just holding on to, and then once you enable it?
So I believe you can inject that type of information. I haven't tried yet.
Okay.
You can also add other MCP servers, but so I'll be honest, the documentation has not been super helpful. I've figured out a lot of things just through trial and error. So if I come down here to my Lightspeed operator and I look at my OLS config, just create a new one. So when you look at this, like some of these things, like MCP server settings, so I can add additional MCP servers in here. Like that's relatively straightforward, right? I can post the things that I need in here. Like this is not the most friendly of things. Like clearly if I need to do authentication against the MCP server, then the intention here is that I need to add a bearer token. But it doesn't actually help me with any of these things. So again, you know, I've been banging the drum of like, again, why are we in 2026, like, why do we make things so difficult? Like, why does this have to be so hard, right? And it gives, at least gives you a hint here, because it probably knows that you want to do an authorization header with a bearer token. But like, come on, y'all.
Yeah.
So, and then up here is where it gets really weird. Like the LLM settings, where I can go in and add the LLM. Like, one of the things that they added with 1.1 is support for Vertex AI. Great, except that there's no like help for actually how to configure that. So I have to know, like, okay, well, do I select it down here, Google Vertex? Well, which Vertex do I use? Okay, what did that actually change? Like, what do I need to configure inside of here, and like how? And so yeah, it's been like, why is this listed in here if I'm not using Azure OpenAI? Like, so yeah, it's been, I don't want to say frustrating, but it has been a little bit frustrating of trying to figure out exactly what I need. And even, asking, I can't ask Lightspeed how to configure Lightspeed when Lightspeed isn't configured because I don't know how to configure Lightspeed.
Money!
Yeah. So that's been interesting, to say the least. One of what I wanted to show is, let's see, I want to replace, and I'm going to replace with, I think you. Are you who I want? Yeah. So this is just a terminal window. So if I do Claude, so I'm going to go into my Claude code instance here. So are you able to connect to the ACALs cluster using MCP? So what I've done here is, in the background, I deployed the OpenShift MCP server. So confusingly, when you look at the documentation, there's a bunch of steps that you have to go through. So step one is like, use the Helm chart to deploy the OpenShift MCP server, which is relatively straightforward. I had to do a little bit of work. The documentation, because the MCP server is tech preview, so the documentation has not been fully polished, and otherwise, it is not as user-friendly as our docs usually are. I'll put it that way. So once I got that done, there's a bunch of other stuff in the documentation about setting up MCP gateway and all of these other things. You don't actually need that if you're just doing MCP on the one cluster. I also deployed it as a specific or a read-only instance. But I can do the same sort of thing here, right? Give me a health report for this cluster, right? And so it's going to do the same thing. Just this time, instead of using, Lightspeed, and Lightspeed in that cluster is configured with Gemini, this time it's Claude with Sonnet 5. And so they'll end up coming back with different things for me to know about. But anyways, I find it's all very interesting, and it's evolving. MCP gateway and all of that, once that ships, again, it's tech preview, I think that'll be really cool.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of people who have got it deployed and working, and it's like, literally in the OpenShift UI, you go in and you browse and you say, oh, I want to deploy the OpenShift MCP server. I want to deploy this. I want to deploy this. I want to deploy this. You tick the boxes, you click OK, and it goes and deploys everything for you. So this is, what is it asking me? Oh, yes, you can use the view MCP process. Again, remember, I don't like to auto approve it. MCP, I would be okay with.
Yeah. Shenaniganing. I love the verbs.
Yeah. One thing, token spend is always an issue. And so I've been considering, like, because the LLMs are non-deterministic, every time you run a command like this, it's going to come back with something slightly different, right? It has, for whatever reason, right, the math behind the vector or its reasoning processes, the angle of the sun, cosmic rays, right? It'll always come back with slightly different things. So my thought for a while has been, like, if I want something like a health report, rather than giving it a blank prompt of give me a health report and seeing what it comes up with, instead, for a scenario like this, telling it, I want a health report that has these things. Create a script that you can use to query the data and output the same format every time. And then it's going to save me a bunch on tokens because it's not having to go through and do all of this thinking and all of this figuring out each time. And instead, it's just applying the logic of, it returned back all of this data. Now let me apply of, oh, this value means that it's healthy. This value means that it's trending unhealthy, that type of stuff. So that way I'm only using my LLM to apply logic, not to do the work of collecting data, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there, it came back and blah, blah, blah. Here's the findings. Here's the summary, right? The cluster is operating normally with all workloads running as expected. So fun thing, so with this particular cluster, it's a bare metal cluster that I use for running virtualization. For a long time, the bare metal host objects weren't functioning correctly. So we do OC get bmh-a. Oh, you're gonna, sorry, stop doing that. You're not a command line. Let's switch back over to we'll switch back over to the actual UI. If we look at my compute nodes and I look at my bare metal hosts, these were all in an error status because it couldn't connect. And the problem was it was just using, so here's my my management connection that it had. So if I look over here, or details should have it. So this was the connection, and it couldn't connect to it. It had an invalid, I think we had just configured it initially with the HTTPS, like just this. And so I went to, like, the first thing I did after I got Lightspeed up and running inside of here was ask it why and what was going on. And it figured out that I needed to set, the rest of these things inside of here, including with my particular set of servers and the BMC that they have, it's this Redfish minus virtual media, because for whatever reason, the virtual media wasn't working or doesn't work, plus HTTPS. And you see now it's fully functional and it's reporting healthy inside of there. So anyways, it's been super helpful for me. And I while I am cautious of it doing things that I don't want it to, I'm happy that I'm able to figure out things and get things operating, healthy and normally with significantly less effort. I wouldn't have to go in and learn, spend hours learning about things and researching things and digging through code and all of this other stuff. I can just ask it and apply, either apply an educated guess or ask it for like references and details, like tell me how you came to this conclusion. So.
Do you find that you are going to that first? Do you know what I mean? Like instead of like, hey, look, there's an issue, instead of trying to dig into it and look at the logs, do you find yourself going to Lightspeed first and asking, or do you go and look at the logs, give it a cursory glance, and then ask? Like what's kind of your approach there?
That's a good question. I think I am probably starting to use the LLMs first.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that depending on what it is, I might even be doing it simultaneously. So for example, the build config that I was doing earlier, right? So I went in, I created the build config, it kicked off, and I had a build, and it's since cleaned everything up, but I had a build that was failing. Okay, well, let me look at, this should be easy. Why is it failing? Oh, it's failing because it relied on an image stream and the internal registry was not configured inside of there, right?
Mm.
So this image stream wasn't valid because it didn't have the registry. Okay, well, why is, what do I need to do to configure the internal registry? So I have an idea of that. I've done it ages ago, but I haven't had a use for it, so I never configured it in this cluster. Okay, so Lightspeed, and actually for this one I went to Claude and I let it use OC and said, configure, the internal registry using a PVC, an RWO PVC. So this is one of those times where it went through, it created the PVC and all this other stuff, it deployed everything, and then it came back and it said, oh, the registry can't scale up because the PVC is RWO. And then it wanted to delete the PVC and then go out and configure an S3 endpoint and then configure it with that. To which I said, no, reconfigure it to be a single instance. And, or no, it was it wasn't that. It was the update strategy.
Mhm.
It wanted to use the rolling update strategy, not the replace update strategy, and that was what was failing with the RWO PVC. So I said, no, don't use the rolling update strategy. Use the replace update strategy. And said, oh yes, that you're in its sycophantic way. You're
Oh,
correct.
you're right.
Yeah. And so I got everything up and running, and then I was having an issue where I got everything up, and it was still kicking back an error in the build saying that the internal registry wasn't configured. And it turned out it was because the image stream hadn't updated after the internal registry was configured, and so I had to blow away and recreate the image stream, which was one of those of like, at first I set light speed on it, and light speed's going through and it's checking this and doing this, and oh, what about that, and blah blah blah. And finally I went to just my normal search engine and it was like blah blah blah, and like the first result was oh, it's probably this. So then I went to Claude. You see I'm switching around between all of these things, and said like, could this be the issue? And it said, oh yes, do you want me to replace that for you? Well, yes, I do. Thank you. And
yeah, thank you so much.
And then everything worked magically. So, but it was one of those like, I do this so infrequently, right? I'm an administrator. Like, I'm aware of these things. I generally know how they work. Me being the person creating them, I do it so infrequently, and so it was so much easier than me having to basically try and figure out all of these things and how it works and what it means.
And fat finger, typo, all the crazy stuff that goes with it, right?
So that's a huge one. Like I've stopped writing YAML objects for OpenShift, and I ask it to create the objects for me. Ooh. So like this build config, I want to create a build config for this. Here's the relevant data, create the objects, and it spits out the YAML, and then I can go in and I can look at the YAML and I can modify things if I want, but I don't have to go and like before it would be okay, let me come up to the API Explorer, right? Build config, okay, build config, now let me go through and like dig through, okay, I need to create a spec, I need to go through and add these things in here, or I have to randomly search the internet or the docs for an example and build from there. No, like do this for me. And that's one thing where I've found Lightspeed lacks. Lightspeed doesn't have write access into the cluster. So it can give you pointers to like documentation, it can give you examples, but with Claude Code, I use Claude Code, you can do it with Cursor or whatever tool you have. Like I can have it, hey, create this object for me, and let me review it beforehand, and then if I'm comfortable with it, I can say yes, apply that object inside of there. Yeah. So anyways, I clearly I'm pretty bullish on LLMs changing the way that we interact with our clusters. And even things like multi-cluster management, right? I've been harassing the ACM team for like 3 years now of like, hey, I have a cluster. It's my first cluster. It's my favorite cluster. It's the perfect cluster. I love everything about it. I now have 30 other clusters. I want to take these configurations and I want to add them to ACM as policy and then apply them out there. And there's nothing in ACM that says, copy this configuration. There's nothing in the cluster that is managed by ACM that says, add this configuration as a managed policy type of thing. But now using the LLM, I can say, hey, this cluster, take this configuration and create it as an ACM policy and then apply it out to any cluster that has the label blah.
Yep, that's how we do it. Oh, that's
so easy. It's so easy.
Yep.
Like, I'm like, I love being able to do that. And anyways, MCP, Lightspeed, LLMs as an administrator tool is just, it's really cool to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's see some other things. We talked about RCOS 10 already. Thank you, rhope9, for bringing that one up. The other thing that I'll note, when RCOS 10 comes out, so RCOS rel 10 has some other post-quantum cryptography things inside of it, and that will continue to evolve. So if PQC, post-quantum cryptography, is a concern of yours, I would definitely suggest updating to rel 10, RCOS 10 when you have the opportunity. Let's see, other things. So there's been some changes with, I'm going to call them small footprint clusters. So single node OpenShift, they have reduced the base resource requirements down to just 2 cores, 4 threads, which is pretty awesome in my opinion.
Hell yeah.
Johnny, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about it. I really want to do a stream of like, I am completely new to Red Hat and OpenShift. How do I get started and use like in my home lab? And like, how do I go to developer.redhat.com and register for an account? And now that I have my account, I go to console.redhat.com/OpenShift and I use the assisted installer to create a Snow instance, and kind of go from there. How do I how do I get started? Because I love our docs. Our docs are overwhelming in their thoroughness, if you will, but there is no like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. Like, what's the steps for me to start and go through?
Yeah, legit step one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So seeing the Snow requirements pulled all the way down to 2 cores, like to me that's pretty awesome, particularly because like I have a home server, right? It's like a, I don't know, gosh, it's probably 6 or 8 years old now. It's running like a Ryzen 2600. It runs a few VMs, right? And it's using what is it using now? TrueNAS, I think, because it also does storage for my house. But like, I want to replace that with OpenShift virtualization. And with the requirements, like the biggest complaint historically has been, oh, well, the overhead of OpenShift is like prohibitive when you have a server that only has 6 or 8 cores and 32 or 64 gigabytes of memory. I feel like that's rapidly changing. I say rapidly changing. Well, it's finally changed. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really happy to see that change because it's annoying.
Yeah. Agreed. So yeah, we should definitely get schedule that in, pencil that in at some point. We can figure that one out.
I like that idea.
Other things with small footprint clusters. So 2-node with failover is GA. So this is a true 2-node cluster deployment. It uses RHEL, which is a pacemaker to maintain quorum for etcd. So with that, keep in mind that currently now 422 2-node with failover only supports 2 nodes. You cannot add additional worker nodes inside of there. However, 2-node with Arbiter, which is the 2.5-node instance where I have an Arbiter node that is just, it has reduced resource requirements because it's only running control plane things. That one, I believe, is now supported to add additional worker nodes to that. I would still recommend keeping in mind, like, eventually, even if and when we do add support for 2-node control plane to add worker nodes, I would not consider this a true like stretch cluster solution, right? Where I've got 2 sites and I want to stretch a cluster across both of those so that I can lose any one site at any point in time. Like, that's still a really hard scenario because there's storage is a hard one. Networking continues to be hard around like, how do I get access to, how do I, how do I update load balancer, DNS, right? Any of those other things if my things are changing. Storage is probably the biggest one of how do I provide resilient storage and how do I ensure that my PVCs can be remounted if the source storage, the PVC, was originally connecting on the now failed site, right? How does my CSI driver handle that and everything else? So 2-node and edge use cases are coming along, but again, if I'm doing a stretch cluster, that's still one of those, like, it's not just 2-node and then I'm good. We still got to put additional thought into that. 3-node OpenShift compact cluster, it's still a thing. It's still do all of the things with it, right? Schedule control planes. So it's funny because we say compact cluster, which is just a 3-node cluster where it's using schedulable control planes, particularly for bare metal, right? It's pretty common to use schedulable control planes because who wants to have 3 gigantic servers that are dedicated to control plane functions, which are probably not consuming all of that.
Yeah.
There, I just realized I wasn't clicking anything in that, so why have it up? So schedulable control planes is pretty common. I will note with OpenShift virtualization, we still don't support memory overcommit with WASP and swap for schedulable control planes. And that is, it's a testing and validation thing with control plane nodes and swap. In particular, the concern is if I have if I have a partition or a file that I'm using for swap that's on the same NVMe device that etcd is on, then what does that mean? Like, what happens if I suddenly start swapping a whole bunch and it uses up all the IOPS and suddenly my etcd latency spikes, and that causes, leader re-elections or whatever other kind of crazy stuff is happening? Now I've just had a ripple effect across the functionality of my entire cluster because one node started swapping. So that's why there's hesitation there. Good news is you can use hosted control planes. You can use dedicated control plane with the control plane nodes running in virtual machines elsewhere, and you can still use swap and memory overcommit with those bare metal nodes for OpenShift virtualization. I'll also point out that Kubernetes native swap in 4.22 is now in tech preview. So the difference there is OpenShift virtualization, we knew we needed swap in order to do memory overcommit safely, right? So that way, when, if the node comes under memory pressure, it starts swapping that data instead of doing an OOM kill on a virtual machine, which is really not healthy for the application and the operating system. So upstream Kubernetes was just not moving fast enough. So they decided to do the workaround with WASP. But upstream Kubernetes, now that we have Kubernetes native swap, that'll work with any workload as far as I know, not just virtual machines like WASP does.
Nice.
Let's see, other things. Bare metal as a service was shipped with OpenShift 4.22. I thought that was a pretty cool one if that's a thing that your organization needs. Looking through the list here, we went out of order, so I'm trying to we already talk about this? Have we already covered this? OADP 1.6 added single file restore for virtual machines, which is pretty cool. Happy to see that. I need to check in with the OADP folks, because it used to be, so OADP, there is no change block tracking in Kubernetes. So some of our ecosystem backup partners and disaster recovery partners have their own methods of implementing and supporting change block tracking, but there's nothing sort of generic in OpenShift or Kubernetes. So I think what that means is with OADP, if I take a backup of a virtual machine, it's always a full backup. Without CBT, without change block tracking, there's no ability to do incrementals or diffs. So that is changing. If you were at Summit, and we've talked about it many times as well, it was probably in the most recent What's Next presentation. They are working on CBT with OpenShift virtualization. So keep an eye out for that sometime in the future. Other things on my list here, we talked about dynamic plugins. We talked about RCOS 10. Some networking things. EVPN is GA. So if your organization uses EVPN as your method for connecting different parts and pieces, that's now supported. For, again, virtualization perspective, that's really cool because it makes cross-cluster live migration a lot easier. Thank you for posting the blog in there, Jonny. Appreciate that. Yep. The release notes say that we now support LLDP with OpenShift, but I can't actually figure out what that means and how we're using it. I dug around in the documentation, I couldn't find anything. I haven't looked in the code base to figure out what does this mean, but we support LLDP now with OpenShift, specifically on BREX, so the OVS that is hosting the OVN Kubernetes overlay network. So again, I don't know what that means, but hey, we support it. And when I looked at the Jira issue, I would bring it up, but I'm logged into Jira, so it would show all of the stuff that I'm not supposed to show, which is all of the customer accounts that have requested it. So anyways, there's a huge list of customers that are interested in LLDP support. But again, I can't figure out what it actually means yet. So there's a solid chance that one of the networking folks will see this stream and then they'll reach out to me and yell at me for not knowing this. So
hopefully.
Yeah. So the last networking, the last networking thing that I have is we added tech preview support for doing no overlay with BGP. So to me, that's a really cool one. So OVN Kubernetes, right, works by using Geneve tunnels between the nodes. We create an entire overlay network inside of there. So all of the node to node, pod to pod traffic is encrypted, not at the, not inside of the cluster, but at the transport layer, right, using Geneve. So with BGP no overlay, now basically each, I have a BGP network implementation inside of there. I have an AS number. It's running FRR in each one of the nodes. When I instantiate a workload, a pod, it assigns it an IP address, it uses BGP, and it advertises that out to the rest of the world. So those workloads, whether they're a pod or a VM, are connected directly to the outside network with no overlay in the mix there, which is really cool for a couple of reasons. One, of course, with VMs, it's awesome to be able to have direct, connection where I don't have to worry about it. But two, for folks, particularly with things like hosted control planes, where overlay can be an issue, we can do away with that, right? So now everything is BGP. There is no additional layers. Now I'm not, eating into my MTU with each one of those layers, and otherwise making troubleshooting that much more complicated. Let's see, RHOPE 9, key LLDP behavior in OpenShift. Underlying interface LLDP settings are now correctly preserved and supported when applied to network bridges, VRF compatibility. Okay. Interesting. Known reboot caveats. Yeah, it's going to cause it to reboot if you turn on LLDP. And no need to apologize. And I appreciate the wall of text. I know Johnny and I can see it here in our interface, but I think all the folks on YouTube, it cuts off after 200 characters. So, RHOPE 9, I know you're on Twitch, so anybody who's watching on Twitch, you can go and see the full message inside of there. But long story short, there is some pretty cool things there, in particular around VRF and integrating with external network devices. So, I think the last couple of kind of random things, I guess, I have here. UBI minimal is now being implemented across all of the core OpenShift pods. This is just a security thing to reduce the footprint. They're also implementing network policies by default for all of the core OpenShift features and functions, which is really cool. So just enhancing the default security stance of the cluster and sort of all of the parts and pieces inside of there. So I'm happy to see that happening. The last one is in-place vertical pod auto-scaling. So this is a weird way of saying that we can now change the resource allocations for pods without having to restart them. Really cool for a lot of reasons. For virtual machines, it's especially cool because it means that when I change, if I do a hot add of resources, CPU memory, I don't have to do a live migration in order for those to take effect. Because historically, pods are immutable. Once I create the pod, it has two vCPUs or 2,000 millicores and 4 gigabytes of memory. That pod is statically configured those resources. If I want to go and say, oh, I want you to have 8 gigabytes of memory, I now have to live migrate. So I instantiate a new pod with the new resources. I live migrate the VM into that new pod, and then I can reconfigure KVM, the virtual machine inside, to take advantage of those new resources. Now I don't have to do that. Now we can just change the pod resource allocation and be done with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that one in there. I think that I'm looking at our gigantic list here, and I know we're an hour and a half in. Looking at our gigantic list here, I think we covered all the things we wanted to cover.
Yeah, one thing I did want to add, it was more of an announcement that I should have said earlier, but I saw, I don't even know how I saw this, if I just stumbled on it. Anyways, it happened. There is now a certification. It's called the Red Hat Certified Specialist in OpenShift Networking. And so it's a certified, it's an exam that you can take that goes over the SDN stuff. And so it shows you how to use like enum state operator with OpenShift virtualization, with ODF, a bunch of different things. And so I haven't taken the test. I haven't really looked at it too much, but I just thought that it was kind of cool that like now there's a certification out there for you. If you're a cert nerd like I used to be, this is kind of a big deal. So especially if you're trying to get like your OpenShift RHCE or whatever they call it these days. So
yeah, I remember seeing the announcement for that one come out. I'm happy to see it. Networking is one of those things that the networking features and capabilities inside of OpenShift, like the native capabilities, are incredibly robust now. It's not to say that there isn't, valid reasons for, our partners. We've got Christian coming on in a couple of weeks with Isovalent or Cisco Isovalent. Our friends at Tigera, like they all have, very valid, very capable solutions as well. And there's very good reasons for choosing those. But at the same time, like OVN Kubernetes and the SDN implementation is just, since we moved away from OpenShift SDN, back in 4.14, the feature set has just exploded. It's really impressive. So, and rHope9, thank you for sharing that blog post. I had not seen that one, and that is a very helpful, just at a glance, I see the charts or the tables in there that are super helpful for understanding like when it triggers those reboots, or excuse me, those pod restarts. And very much to the point, or very much to what I was just saying, like changing CPU and memory don't result in that being a restart. So that's pretty awesome. So I think that's all I got, Johnny.
Yeah. Awesome. That was a lot.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny. I think I've said this on the stream before. When we talk about, so there's the release and there's the announcement, right? So the release is the day that engineering, right, makes the bits available. The announcement is when marketing starts talking about the new release. Oftentimes those things are, and by oftentimes, they are always decoupled. Usually the release happens before the announcement. So it's fun to be able to talk about these things now. Like the 422 announcement was decoupled from the release by like 3 weeks or something this time. So they wanted us to not talk about it in as much depth as we have been, and stuff like that. Yeah, I forgot where I was going with the rest of that, but I had something else to say there.
Yeah, it's good though, man. I think that like again, looking through the presentation, I was like, oh man, there's actually a lot of like really awesome things in here, and like it definitely has inspired a couple of ideas. Like I really want to take a look at the Quay thing and then kind of get an idea of what that's going to look like, and then I mean maybe we get the PM to come on and talk about all the new features and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. I think that would make some fun episodes to at least just kick the tires on and get pissed at being too dumb to figure it out on our own. So
okay, so I don't think we have anything else on our schedule, at least nothing concrete aside from the upcoming stream with Christian. I know that you and I have a bunch of topics that we want to cover, including, I don't remember which one of the ones I did, if it was networking or storage. I covered one of my summit sessions, I think. So we can still talk about the other one. I still want to do the install stuff, like the 0 to OpenShift home lab thing.
Yeah.
So there's a number of topics that we have on the backlog here that we'll cover in the upcoming months. And then of course there's an ongoing parade of all kinds of things that are happening all of the time. So
yes, indeed. Awesome. All right. Well, great stream. Good seeing you again. Yeah, once we get something more concrete locked down, I'll post it to LinkedIn, and then if you follow the channel on YouTube, then you should see the update for the playlist. So if you have any ideas, if there's something that you want to see, or if there's something that like there's some feature that you heard about or that you've seen, or something that you've seen that you want us to dive in on, please email us and let us know, and we'll do our best to get it lined up. But with that, Sully, have a great weekend, and I will see you next week. Nope, you're muted.
I am muted. Yeah. You have a good weekend too. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate all your interactivity. And like Johnny said, don't hesitate to reach out.